Hello, my name is Levi Woods and welcome to How to Play Chess. The history of chess spans back almost, wait for it, 2.5 billion years as records show. The procedures of the game originated in India in the 6th century AD. From India the game spread to Persia when the Arabs conquered Persia. Chess was taken up by the Muslim world, who then sequentially spread the game to southern Europe. Chess appeared in southern Europe during the end of the first millennium, often introduced to new lands by conquered armies such as Norman conquest of England. It was so successful that every country was almost forced to learn and share experienced chess around the world. Once in Europe, the game evolved in the 15th century to current rules we use right up to the present day. As time went on, the game began to become more and more competitive, with modern tournaments being arranged in the 19th century, with the first World Championship held in 1886. The 21st century seen great leap within the chess theory side, with math analysis using computers. Chess has easily proven that it takes the #1 spot for the best and oldest game in human history. Here we have your typical chessboard with 8 by 8 with black and white squares separating each other. The basics of setting up a chessboard is so simple it's probably easier than setting up boards on the pool table. First of all, we need to make sure our board is sitting the right way, with right squares at the bottom right, shown here. If easier for yourself, you can make coordinates as reference, with the letters running across the bottom row and numbers running up the side. Chess is a game played between two opponents, one opponent's side of a board containing 64 squares of alternative colors. Each player has 16 pieces, 1 king, 1 queen, 2 rooks, 2 bishops, 2 knights, and 8 pawns. The goal of the game is to checkmate the other king. Checkmate happens when the king is in position to be captured. In check and cannot escape from capture, let's meet the players. From now on, I will be handing you over to my co-narrator, Norman MacLeod. He will be taking you for the second part of the tutorial. Hello, my name's Norman MacLeod and I will be taking you for the second part of this tutorial. The pawn. Definitely the lowest to the players, but very important. At the start of the game you will have 8 pawns, and they will represent the peasants who usually lived outside the castle walls. The rook looks like the corner of a castle or a tower, represents the protection of the castle walls. 2 rooks per player. And the knight, represented by a horse's head, but often seen as a full horse-mounted knight, represents the power of the king's army. 2 knights per player. The bishop, represented by a piece that wears what resembles a hat customary of the bishops from the medieval times, represents the religious influence on those times. 2 bishops per player. Then we have the queen, also holds a crown that is often fancier than the king. A lot of people's favorite player due to its ability to move almost any direction on the board. 1 queen per player. And finally the king. I love the king. The tallest and most important piece of the game. Usually he wears a cross on the top of his crown. 1 king per player. Now that we know what the players are and what they look like, and how the board is laid out, we can now set out our players. Let's start with the pawns. Very simple. Each pawn goes on the second row from the bottom on your side. So for example, A2 across to H2, like so. Next, let's set up our rooks. Pretty basic. Your two rooks go at the bottom corner of the boards at A1 and H1. Moving on now to the knights. Ah, the knights. I love the knights. Remember the two that look like a horse's head? These two players go next door to the rooks, on the coordinates B1 and G1, as we can see here. So we only have two players left. And it's pretty obvious where they go, but remember, the queen always goes on its own color, which then means your king goes next to its wife. The same goes for the other side of the board. You should know now how to set up a chessboard. It's time now to learn how to play chess. Many rules apply to the world of chess, but actually once you've had a couple of games it will become second nature. Each of the 6 different kinds of pieces move differently. Pieces cannot move through other pieces, though the knight can jump over other pieces, and can never move into a square with one of their own pieces. However, they can be moved to take the place of an opponent piece, which is then captured. Pieces are generally moved into positions where they can capture other pieces, by landing on their square and replacing them, defend their own pieces in case of capture, or control important squares in the game. As you now know, we start off with 8 pawns in the second row. Pawns are unusual because they move and capture in different ways. They move forward, but capture diagonally. Pawns can only move forward 1 square at a time, except for the very first move, where they can move forward 2 squares. Pawns can only capture 1 square diagonally in front of them. They can never move or capture backwards. If there's another piece directly in front of a pawn, he cannot move past or capture that piece. Knights move in very different ways. Ah, the knights. Going 2 squares in one direction, and then they move at 90 degrees angle, just like an L shape. Knights are also the only piece that can move over other pieces. The bishop may move as far as it wants, but only diagonally. The rook may move as far as it wants, but only forward, backwards, and to the sides. The rooks are particularly powerful pieces when they are protecting each other and working together. The queen is the most powerful piece. If moved, she can move in any straight one direction, forward, backwards, sideways, or diagonally, as far as possible, as long as she does not move through any of her own pieces. And, like with all other pieces, if the queen captures an opponent's piece, her move is then over. The king is the most important piece, but is one of the weakest. The king can only move 1 square direction, up, down, to the sides, and diagonally. The king may never put himself in check, where he could be captured. Thank you. My name is Norman MacLeod. Here's Paul Anderton, who will be taking you for the last part of this tutorial. Thank you. Good night. I'm Norman MacLeod.
Cowabunga, dudes. Paul A here. Just here to show you the special rules in chess. Now, there are a few rules in the way of chess that you need to be aware of, for your own advantage, that is. Now, pawns. Pawns have a special ability, and that is if the pawn reaches the other side of the board, it can become any other chess piece. That's right. A king, well, not a king, a horsey, or a little cheeky castle. Anyway, a pawn may be promoted to any piece. A common misconception is that the pawns may only be exchanged for a piece that has been captured. That is not true. A pawn is usually promoted to a queen. Only pawns may be promoted, by the way, so don't you cheeky horsies try to get into my shot. Brilliant! Now, the last rule about pawns is called en passant, which is French, which basically means in passing. If a pawn moves out 2 squares on its first move, and by doing so lands to the side of an opponent's pawn, effectively jumping past the other pawn's ability to capture it, that other pawn has the option of capturing the first pawn, as it passes by, of course. This special move must be done immediately after the first. Otherwise, the option to capture is no longer available. And finally, the famous castling move. This move allows you to do important things all in one. Now the move. Get your king safely, that is, hopefully, and get your rook out of the corner and into the game. On a player's turn, he may move his king 2 squares over to the side, and then move the rook from that side of the corner to right to the next on the king on the opposite side. In order for the castling, however, it must meet the following conditions. It must be the king's very first move. It must be the rook's first move. There are not be any pieces between the king and the rook to move. The king may not be in check or pass through check. Try and keep these moves in mind, as it could be the difference in winning or losing. Now, obviously, in order to do anything, you need to know how to win a game of chess. It's not a case of wiping out all the players before your opponent. I mean, this is not the Holocaust. It's a bit more complex than that. As stated before, the purpose of the game is to checkmate the opponent's king. This happens when the king is put into check and cannot get out of the check. There are only 3 ways a king can get out of check. It can move out the way, block the check with another piece, or the cheeky capture the piece threatening the king. If a king cannot escape checkmate, then the game is over. Customarily, the king is not captured or removed from the board. The game is simply declared over. The last rule you will need to know about chess is, can the game end on a draw? Now, occasionally, chess games do not end with a winner. I mean, this isn't hunting. These games don't end with me handing over a dead body with blood on my face and a loaded gun, smoking, and not knowing where or how I got there. But anyway, there are 5 reasons why a chess game may end in a draw. Number 1, the position reaches a stalemate, where it is one player's turn to move, but the king is not in check, and yet he does not have another legal move. Rule number 2, the players may simply agree to a draw and stop playing. Then after, maybe they can go change their tampons, because only girls would do that. Rule number 3, there are not enough pieces on the board to force a checkmate. For example, a king and a bishop versus a king. It just wouldn't work. Number 4, a player declares a draw if the exact same position is not repeated not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row. And lastly, the 5th and final rule for Paul A. 50 consecutive moves have been played where neither player has moved a pawn or captured a piece. Bit pointless, really. I would have called it a draw by then. And so there you have it. You know the rules, the players, and the basics of how to play chess. So all you need to do is put a cheeky friend in cheeky checkmate. Much like I'll be putting my cheeky clothed fingers over the tombstone of Neil McHardy. I'm Paul A. I've been brilliant. Chess is brilliant. Let's all have a brilliant game. Good night. I like that game.